Okay, hi, my name is Valerie. I'm not usually a journalist, I'm more of just a commenter, so nobody can call this fake news. Last time I checked, we in the United States are still allowed to observe current events and form an opinion. And our opinions may differ sharply from that of our president, any president, our political party, either party, or the opinions of the owners of media outlets such as NPR, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, ABC, you name it. In a sense, if we Americans don't do our homework of observing and researching and thinking, then all news is fake news. Even and especially government-approved or government-corrected news. And I'm referring to the very dangerous clause in the recently signed NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act, which allows the federal government to correct or interfere with or inform or disinform U.S. citizens via news outlets nationwide. Some were shocked by this latest debacle, fearing a too cozy relationship between government and press. But you know what? That has been going on for a long time already. So that said, what I want to get into today is all the fear-mongering about Trump, which we hear almost nonstop throughout the day. I have a unique perspective living in Montana. Maybe it's the big sky here. Maybe it's that I'm nearly 65 years old. So I've seen a few presidents come and go. We hear words some people are especially fond of, words like fascist, for example. Oh, Trump is a fascist wannabe dictator, according to one of the wealthy Democrat donors, George Soros. So let's talk for 1 minute about fascism. Fascism is when a government imposes severe economic or social regimentation on a country, ignoring the diversity that exists. Fascism can take the form of a racist dictatorship, which John Kerry correctly pointed out concerning Israel's policy of putting Judaism and Jews above democracy. Or Sharia, or Wahhabist Muslim law, such as Saudi Arabia, our ally in the Middle East. So the U.S. has been cozy with fascism for a long time. Surprise! Fascism can also take the form of business interests taking over a given government. That is called corporate fascism. The leader of such a regime might indeed be democratically elected, might be called a president, but that president is not listening to the people who elected him or her. He or she is doing what the corporations, they could be banks, such as the Federal Reserve, which is not a government agency, but a group of private, extremely powerful individuals. Or they could be defense contractors, such as Halliburton or KBR, which you might remember from the Bush era, Iraq debacle, that continues to this day despite having a Nobel laureate as president. Or they could be oil conglomerates telling the president to go screw himself or herself when he tells them to walk back their pipeline plans, for example. We see that clearly in the current standoff happening at Standing Rock, North Dakota. Standing Rock is illustrative of a fascist dictatorship. The actual ruler or dictator is the oil corporation, and the president is just a pacifier or a fall guy. Take your pick. So I hope some people are seeing that these words being used to inflame the U.S. populace, especially aimed at Democrats who voted for Hillary Clinton, the words of Trump saying revoking Muslim visas, for example, sending Mexicans back to Mexico, for example, grabbing pussies, words taken out of context and shown as sound bites can indeed seem horrific or racist, one of the labels they love to call all Trump supporters. I'm actually not a Trump apologist, but I will take the time to point out that Trump was referring to Muslims with radical affiliations. His words were radicals who endanger all Americans, gay, straight, Christian, atheist. They have to go. Who has a problem with that? Do you want to live next door to a radical? What if they don't like your lifestyle, your yoga, your gay friends, whose heads they cut off in Afghanistan and Saudi Arabia? Okay, so I hope I'm getting a point across that all of Hillary Clinton's campaign rhetoric, all of the Democrats' fear-mongering about Trump was taken as gospel truth. And now half of the U.S. is shuddering in their booties over this monster Trump, right? Trump is a human being, folks. He is not a monster. He is not even a fascist wannabe dictator. George Soros rhetoric notwithstanding. Now, if you're still with me, I'm going to tell you why, the real reason why the Democrats are so afraid of Trump. And this might surprise you. It might even require some mental gymnastics, but I feel confident we can all do this. I know plenty of nice, well-educated people who think they know everything about Trump, based on what the media outlets have told them, and worse, based on what Hillary Clinton said during debates, or what Democrat-aligned commentators said and continue to say. So here is what is really bugging people. For decades, Democrats have argued and won for more and more government agencies and government regulations. It stands to reason that unbridled capitalism needs to be reined in with federal overseers in order to protect the little people. So, bankers should not be allowed to use depositors' money to make risky investments, right? That's why the Glass-Steagall Act was passed, I believe by Roosevelt. And here I will point out the high hypocrisy of Bill Clinton because of his last moves in 1999. One of them was to kill Glass-Steagall and thus caused extreme damage to our economy during the Bush era, resulting in the crash of 2008, wherein people lost their homes, their pensions, their life savings. Why did Clinton do that? Revenge against the establishment that impeached him? A sick joke? Why does nobody remember this? Okay, so the federal government has become this behemoth thing, this blob. The FDA has put in place was put in place to protect us from quacks who sell snake oil. The Department of Education was established to make sure kids get a good education. The CIA was established to protect us from international espionage. The Department of Defense was created to secure our borders. The wonderful EPA was created to protect the environment, our precious air and water and soil. Democrats rightly like to take credit for all of these agencies, which were all intended to make America a safe, clean, healthy, well-educated place to live. Yay, USA. Republicans, on the other hand, seemingly resist spending taxpayer money on these protections, focusing rather on military buildup. They call those who support the Department of Health and Human Services, for example, liberals, said with a sneer, as if all the U.S. needs is a big army and lots of nukes and drones, and the actual people, especially the sick, old, and poor, including veterans, can darn well take care of themselves somehow. So this ongoing drama, those of us who are older have been watching this battle, sometimes taking sides, has never been resolved. In fact, while we have all been focused on whether we approve of Democrat or Republican philosophy, our representatives in Congress, our presidents and their cabinets, our government oversight agencies have sold us down the river. Democrats are afraid now due to the fact that they created the very agencies that are now controlled by big business via their lobbyists. And some translations of the word lobbyists might be bribers or enforcers. The FDA, Big Pharma, pays huge fees in order to fast-track new drugs. And implicit in those fees are that alternative medicines such as cannabis will be postponed indefinitely, thus depriving us little people of inexpensive medicine we can access easily while expensive and symptomatic relief is approved without the proper long-term testing. For one reason, profit. There are lots of class action lawsuits against drug companies for creating drugs that harm or even kill people, drugs that were approved by the FDA that was established to protect us. The Department of Education has been overtaken by the test-taking industry. The emphasis since even before No Child Left Behind has been on nationwide test-making and test-taking, which is a billion-dollar industry. Yes, every man, woman, and child alive today has a file in some government database with their test scores and even their classroom behavior. So record keeping, there's another big industry that our tax money is paying for. And your federal income tax money pays those monsters to make more tests. Look at the DEA, drug enforcement, so-called war on drugs. These people get paid firstly by us, the taxpayers, secondarily by drug pushers to look the other way while the drug deals continue. The little people that get caught get sent to prisons. So the prisons profit from the DEA because they get more government funding. So if that's not a vicious cycle, indeed, I don't know. Do we actually need the DEA to exist? I think not. So I could go on, but we all have places to go. So now we'll get to my main point. Democrats, beginning with Roosevelt and some wonderful programs such as Social Security, are largely responsible for making Americans believe in the need for federal government oversight and control of most every facet of our lives. Republicans resist this in theory, but have themselves, with lots of Democrat cooperation, created the most expensive, most extensive military and defense organization in all of history. Both Republicans and Democrats have used this military to interfere with foreign countries, often making up excuses to do so. And why? Because they can. To use Theresa May's and Donald Trump's scary words, why have nuclear weapons if you're afraid to use them? Why, indeed. If Trump appoints a Christian creationist to head the Department of Education, that is proof positive to every sane American, Democrat or Republican, that the Department of Education should be shut down, and the 50 states should resume control of the schools in each state. Some states might produce fewer scholars and more mechanics or musicians. Some states might indeed allow creationism to be taught, but citizens concerned about the constitutional protection of separation of church and state might gain consensus and limit or ban religious indoctrination in that state, where it can easily be enforced. If someone or some group wants to pray or meditate or do yoga, that's their right, as long as those non-practitioners are given equal respect to their own belief systems or non-beliefs. If Trump appoints an environmental menace to the EPA, as Bush did, and as Barack Obama has allowed as well, with approval of Monsanto poison, glyphosate is now traceable even in human breast milk. So you can be certain it's in cow's milk, and it's in all California wines, sadly. If Trump's appointee also allows the poisoning of our soil, air, and precious water, there is proof the EPA is ineffective and should be shut down. Nice idea, nice in theory, but in practice, these individuals' jobs exist only to perpetuate the myth that they are protecting the environment. They allowed the Flint, Michigan poison water disaster to occur and continue, for example. In its place, each state is well aware of its own environmental issues and should therefore govern itself. If a state becomes so polluted no one can live there anymore, then that would be the end for them, wouldn't it? Others will come along, people who care. They will remedy the situation over time, and those who allowed the disaster, such as the governor of Michigan, should be imprisoned for negligence, profiteering, endangerment of health, and life itself. It is unconstitutional to endanger the lives of U.S. citizens. Obama last week signed the National Defense Authorization Act, allowing the government to determine or correct news outlets to make the federal government appear nicer than it actually is. That is such a short-sighted policy because of potential misuse of such sweeping power in the hands of a few bureaucrats. Dems are rightly afraid of Trump because they never imagined their monstrous federal government with all of its rules and power would fall into the hands of a person who could abuse that power. Bill Clinton abused it with prison reform, lies about Kosovo and NAFTA, and eliminating the Glass-Steagall banking regulations. George Bush abused it with lies that started the endless wars in the Middle East. Barack Obama abused it by perpetuating the Patriot Act and spying on U.S. citizens by the NSA, and by commanding drone bombing of citizens of other countries with whom we are not even at war. And now Trump. The best case scenario is that he will dismantle some of the Clinton, Bush, Obama federal monsters and hand power and responsibility back to the states, as the U.S. Constitution provides. That is the best case scenario to actually make America great again. And if that's what he does, I'm all for it. And I did not vote for Donald Trump. Democrats, go back to the drawing board. Stop your fear-mongering and Trump bashing and absurd accusations against Russia. Come up with alternatives to war and big government, and people will respect you. Come up with jobs for Americans, and people will vote for you. The nearly 3 million government employees might even find the real world refreshing. So thanks for listening to my rant, if you listen, and have a wonderful 2017, and quit Trump bashing and start thinking and start coming up with real solutions to our very real problems. Thank you. Bye.